During your visit, you may have noticed some other homes locally have successfully extended their properties. However, it would undermine the council's consultative process if this particular plan was passed using those as benchmark examples. May I also request, if there are members here who visited the site today and are considering approving the plan, that further attention is paid to our personal individual circumstances. To reiterate, upon purchasing our property 2 years ago, we researched the area, adjoining properties and neighbouring views, with prior knowledge and experience that the feeling of intrusion can exacerbate my health conditions. If this was not an important requirement of our future home, we would not otherwise have stretched ourselves quite so far financially and instead purchased a property on a housing estate where close proximity living is more commonplace, like Maple Park or Horston Grange. For successful recovery and respite, it is imperative that I can feel relaxed, secure and secluded, and therefore I can only repeat how this change will negatively impact my health. We feel the proposed extension will be overbearing of our garden and rear main living spaces, resulting in an oppressive, overly developed vicinity. We feel it unfair we need to justify retaining something we chose as a requirement of our home before the owners of 10 Hoylake purchased their property. With one of the main reasons we purchased our home being because of the afforded secluded living space at the rear, we request that as the preceding homeowners to the applicants, that our views and feelings on the plan are thoroughly taken into consideration when reaching a voting decision.
Okay, thank you. Are there any points of clarification? No, okay, thank you. Mr. Bliss.
Hoylake Close has 15 dormer bungalows of the same design as our property. 11 of these bungalows have extended in some capacity, whether that be to the rear, the front or even both in several cases. As you turn into Hoylake Close, you'll see the first 4 of these bungalows to your left hand side and they back onto the properties on Sunningdale Drive. The rear of the Hoylake properties faces the rear of the Sunningdale properties, and the distance between these properties is at best half the distance that our home is from the rear of the properties in Hathaway Drive. 3 of these have been extended on the first floor at the rear. My understanding is that the distance between the properties exceeds the minimum requirements required by the planning authority. All of the bungalows on Hoylake Close were built in the 1960s and won an award at the Ideal Home exhibition based on the fact that they could be easily extended to be able to accommodate a growing family, which is something we learned upon viewing the property and speaking with neighbours. After 2.5 years of trying, lots of medical treatment, and more lows than highs, my wife finally became pregnant with our first child in July last year, which gave us not only the boost we needed, but also the necessity to continue the search in finding our family home. After many viewings, we found the one for us, and we're very excited of the potential that it has to be perfect for our needs. However, with the baby being due soon and our bungalow only having 1 bedroom upstairs, we knew that the time was of the essence and we would have to act fairly quickly in order to put another room upstairs for a nursery in time for the arrival of the baby. Therefore, we discussed with our architect alternatives in order to ensure that the works and design would not only tie in with the neighbouring properties, but would also comply with the planning guidelines. After submitting our plans, we were genuinely taken back by the objections raised, as they were not from any property within our close, they were not a breach of any planning legislation, and the planning officer has also recommended approval for the extension. I have been advised that the ground floor extension we proposed would be considered permitted development and that the planning permission is not required. Thus we could start work on that now. The first floor extension of the rear is for a new bedroom and ensuite. The window to the ensuite will have frosted glass, thus privacy should not be an issue. The 6-foot fence at the bottom of my garden gives privacy between the habitable rooms on the ground floor. My wife and I have spoken with residents within the close to get their ideas and thoughts about what we planned to do and could realistically achieve, and have received nothing but positive feedback and support. We purchased this property in July 2018 and moved in September, with the intention of building our forever home, a home we will build our family in and make our very own. Unfortunately, this process so far has caused nothing but stress and anxiety for my wife, as we had hoped to have the nursery ready for the arrival of our first child. I therefore plead with you today not to deprive us of the same rights as other residents within the close and allow us to build our perfect family home. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one moment. Are there any points of clarification? No. Okay, thank you. Jackie, anything you need to come back on?
No.
In that case, can I move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission? that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Any member? No? In that case, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? That's unanimous, thank you. So that's approved. Which takes us on to item number 2, which is the proposed cycle path rear of 9 Silver Birch Avenue. Apparently the glitch has been repaired and it's now, the meeting is now being recorded, so just to let you know. Jackie?
Okay. This application was deferred in January by members due to a last-minute objection from Warwickshire County Council Highways requesting that a road safety audit was necessary. This application is for the creation of a 3-metre wide tarmac-adden cycle and footpath route from the Nook to Small Lane Balancing Pond within the sidings. Notwithstanding the level of objection received, the application has been reported to Planning Application Committee at the request of Councillor Kyle Evans. By way of history, the cycle route was originally proposed and secured through a legal agreement in 1997 attached to the new housing development off Bluebell Drive, which was constructed during the late 1990s and early 2000s. This cycle and footpath route was to be constructed prior to the occupation of a certain number of those houses. This cycle, at the time, the route proposed was to follow the railway cutting that is on lower ground level than the rest of the built development. That's the cutting there. At the time, the proposed route, as I say, was to follow the railway cutting. This caused significant opposition from residents further along the track, in that the route was not sufficiently overlooked and could be a place for antisocial behaviour. Due to these concerns, the route was not implemented, and now due to the passage of 20 years or so, it is unreasonable to enforce the implementation of this previous application. In 2017, an application for up to 180 dwellings off Ashley Lane was submitted, and as part of this application it was negotiated that the development would provide the cycle link, and it was duly included in the legal agreement for that development. The red line is the Ashley Lane development, the blue is your short tenancies, that is the open space, and that was part of the legal agreement for providing that footpath. That application was determined by Planning Application Committee in 2017, and the committee agreed that for sustainability reasons the cycle footpath link was importantly, especially as it provided alternative routes to motorised vehicles. There is, however, a clause in the legal agreement that secures this link. This requires that the planning application for the route has to be determined within 4 months of submission. This current application was received on the 22nd of October, and therefore the application was to be determined before the 22nd of February. If the application is not determined by the 22nd, the obligation to provide the link will cease. If the council then subsequently chose to deliver the route independently, it is likely to cost in the region of £340,000 based on 2015 prices. Obviously we do not have those funds at the moment, and certainly in the foreseeable future. The proposed route in this application extends from the Nook, which is to the rear of 4 Juniper Close there. The Nook is there, that's where the track starts in the brown. It then crosses over the disused railway line, as mentioned there, and runs in close proximity and parallel with the railway cutting in an area of public open space, which was created when the new houses off Bluebell Drive was built. It will pass 43 and 22 Orchid Close at a separation distance of 19 metres, and the end of the cul-de-sac of Mallowcroft, just there, at a separation of 11.5 metres. Members will note that the original plan provided a connection into Mallowcroft, which has been removed due to public objection. The proposed route then joins to the existing public footpath route from Sellendine Way, which is shown there, where it crosses the railway cutting leading to Woodland Park Estate and continues along the public open space past Fern Grove at a separation of approximately 5.3 metres. Beyond this, the route then enters the public open space off Bluebell Drive, past the play area, and joins with the existing path that runs around the balancing lake within the large area of public open space known as the sidings. However, it is only the northern part of the circular footpath that is to be upgraded, that runs to the rear of the properties on Silver Birch Avenue. At the closest, the path is just over 9.5 metres from the boundary with these properties, and there is already a path in this location. It will finally join the existing tarmac path that runs along the open space at the corner of Smorrel Lane and Heath Road and will lead to the adopted highway. It should be noted that the land on which the cycle path is proposed is all publicly accessible now and is used heavily. There are, however, times of the year when parts of the land is wet and muddy, and therefore the path is not currently an all-weather route. Officers consider that the key issues in the determination of the application are the principle of supplying the route, the impact on ecology and biodiversity, the consideration of the original agreed route, and highway safety. Flooding is a matter that has been covered on your agenda, but I do not propose to add any further comments to this from the agenda. As members will see, page 32 to 35 of the agenda, and on the addendum, that there has been a significant level of objection to the proposal and petitions of objection. There have also been some communications of support. The objections received centre around the following issues: that the location is wrong, it should be in the railway cutting, that it will have ecological implications, especially to the great crested newts in the area, that it will lead to antisocial behaviour, motorbikes and travellers invading the area, and will give disturbance and security issues to neighbouring properties, as it will be used as an escape route and will be used more often by youths, and that money should be used to upgrade the park, and that there's no need as there's already a cycle path on Bluebell Drive. The letters of support centre around the following issues: that it's a great facility, it provides off-road cycling routes which are needed and will affect less wildlife than if it had been placed in the cutting. In relation to the first issue with the principle of supplying the route, Safe Policy H6 of the 2006 existing Borough Plan is relevant to the determination of this application. This policy refers to the Council seeking planning obligations for increased demand for social and community facilities, including sport. The route that the cycle path is on, as I say, can already be walked, but making a formal path will mean that it can be used all year round for a wide variety of people, cyclists, walkers, and people with pushchairs or with mobility issues. The provision within the legal agreement is specific in that it only allows for the route to be provided within that area of open space, and is for the developer to provide the route rather than for a financial contribution for the provision by the council. The money cannot be used elsewhere, it has to be used specifically to that. Other relevant policies exist within the emerging borough plan. Whilst this has not yet been adopted, the plan has gone a substantial way through the examination process. National Planning Policy Framework sets out the decision takers may give way to relevant policies in emerging plans according to the stage of preparation and to the extent to which these are unresolved objections to the relevant policies. There are no unresolved objections in relation to the relevant policies that I'm about to refer to, and therefore substantial weight can be given to these policies. Within the emerging plan, policy DS1, similar to the heart of the NPPF, is the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and that this should be approved without delay. As the application for the Ashley Lane houses have been approved, but not yet commenced on site, it has been counted towards the borough's housing land supply. This proposed route is integral to making the approved development sustainable. Policy HS2 requires adequate accessibility to all modes of transport and its connectivity to strategic facilities by way of providing a sustainable transport link and meeting a 15% modal transport shift to non-car based modes of transport. This proposal would provide vital infrastructure to help meet this targeted modal shift. Policy H6 encourages physical activity through the provision of cycle routes through existing and future residential areas, linking those areas to Bedworth town centre and beyond. Cycling improvements are also specified in the Council's infrastructure delivery plan. The NPPF also encourages planning decisions to achieve inclusive places with street layouts and, amongst other things, that allow for easy pedestrian and cycle movements within and between neighbourhoods, are safe and accessible so that crime or the fear of crime does not undermine the community by using the use of clear routes, high quality public spaces which encourage use of public areas and support healthy lifestyles through the encouragement of walking and cycling. As set out on your agenda, the route chosen aims to link to other cycle routes in the area. See this plan here. And will connect the proposed new dwellings, the existing surrounding dwellings, the north to the public open space of the sidings, the local shops on the corner of Smorrel Lane, and ultimately linking up with paths to the town centre, the Miners Welfare Park, the leisure centre and beyond. The coloured plan, as I say, shows these links. It can be seen but in black and white in the agenda on page 45. It's part of the wider proposed cycle network. Much of the payment for the network has already been agreed in existing legal agreements or from applications that are in the pipeline. As stated previously, a number of residents have objected on the grounds of concerns of increased antisocial behaviour and crime. What we have to bear in mind is that the route is already open to public use. It may well be that the formalising this could actually discourage any antisocial behaviours by increasing the legal use of it. Warwickshire Police confirm that there are already existing concerns about the misuse of the land from motorbikes. However, provided that steps are taken to remove the chance of motorcyclists using the route, the police do not object to the scheme. A number of restrictions are included that aim to prevent the use of the track by motorcycles. The Council's Parks team have confirmed that more barriers can be added if necessary. In conclusion, it is considered that support for this proposal is embedded within local and national guidance. In relation to the impact on ecology, the public open space that the route is on is mown grass and therefore is limited in terms of biodiversity it provides. The area can be seen from the photos on this slide. It also shown on these photographs that the route is already walked by the level of wear and tear on the grass and the amount of mud showing through. The road safety audit that was carried out recognised that this route was already heavily used by walkers and also by some cyclists. Whilst there is a known population of great crested newts in the area, these are at least 50 metres away from the application site. The Council's Parks and Ecologists and Warwickshire Wildlife Trust are confident that the imposition of conditions will adequately protect the newts. In relation to putting the route in the originally proposed location of the railway cutting, government policy has over time increased the importance given to the areas of high biodiversity and wildlife sites, and the development of such should be avoided and alternatives sought. The railway cutting, which has been suggested by residents as the correct location, is actually a potential local wildlife site. And once fully surveyed, if it was under threat from development, it's highly likely that it would be given full local wildlife status. If the track were proposed here, a significant amount of vegetation would need to be cleared. This would be against national policy and would have a significant detrimental impact in biodiversity within the cutting that it currently provides. In addition, the cutting is on lower ground and does not benefit from natural surveillance. Therefore, it would be against policy to create a path here. Some objectors have suggested infilling the cutting to raise ground levels, but this would be cost prohibitive and would completely destroy the ecology within the cutting to the detriment of the wildlife, especially as this cutting acts as a corridor to wildlife. As members will see from the plans of the route, the path has been located so as to have minimal impact on the trees and bushes that run adjacent to the route, and have been located as far away as possible from residential properties. The impact can be minimised further by hand digging in particular sensitive areas, such as in root areas. As I've already mentioned, the plans have been amended to change the route adjacent to Malacroft, to remove the link from the end of this cul-de-sac and move the route further away from the properties as far as possible, but without affecting the trees on the edge of the cutting. In relation to highway safety, County Highways did not have an objection to the principal having a cycle route in the location, but need to be assured that where there are connections to the highways, e.g. to Smorrell Lane and Celandine Way, that these are safe and comply with the relevant standards. A road safety audit has been carried out and raised 5 areas of issues which are now stated. At the end of the route, adjacent to the Nook, they were concerned that before the path through to the proposed new adjacent development was built, that this would be a dead end and cause cyclists to continue on unsafe muddy routes, or due to it being a dead end, would put people off using it in the future. The recommendation in the road safety audit, the RSA, is that alternative temporary routes to nearby estates be provided until the full route is built. The Council's response to this is that the route does not have to be provided until 50% of the proposed houses are occupied. However, this legal agreement refers to the entire path, and therefore the developers are likely to create the path currently discussed at the same time as the path within the adjacent proposed development site. Therefore, there would be no dead end at this point. A temporary diversion would not be practicable, as it would require a new application and would not be funded by the developer, as the proposed route, as said before, is very specific within the legal agreement. The second point of concern in the RSA is that the existing path from the point it meets Celandine Way, there, has street lighting, but where the new route will join this, it will not. This could potentially cause collisions between cyclists and walkers in the dark. The RSA's recommendation is that lighting is provided at this point. The Council's response to this is that whilst this cannot be expected to be provided by the developer, as a legal agreement is specific to an unlit path, this can be conditioned and will be provided by the Council, which in any case will likely be adopting the land. The third issue is due to the installation of cycle barriers. Cyclists could bump into these in the hours of darkness. The RSA's recommended response is that the barriers be fitted with reflective strips. The Council's response is that this could easily be conditioned, but has not been requested by County Highways. The fourth issue is the absence of signage could lead to cyclists going wrong or using unsafe routes and being involved in accidents. The RSA's response is that signage should be provided at junctions. The Council considers that is an acceptable condition and has been agreed with the applicant. Highways' response to the RSA, as I say, is that it's acceptable subject to the conditions for the signage and the lighting, and you'll see those on the addendum. Members are therefore requested to bear in mind that it does comply with national and local policy, and the recommendation is therefore one of approval subject to the conditions set out in the agenda and the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this item this evening. I'm here this evening to object to planning application 035973HE to create a cycle route between Astley Lane and Small Lane in Bedworth. When this was discussed at the last planning committee meeting, you decided to defer the item in order for Warwickshire County Council to go away and conduct a road safety audit. The audit conducted by Warwickshire County Council raises a number of concerns. Firstly, until the development at Astley Lane is completed, it means cyclists who finish it off at Astley Lane may need to use muddy paths to complete their journey. The County Council raises that this may cause some health and safety issues. Warwickshire County Council also raises the concern of the lack of signage, which could lead to cyclists using the wrong or even unsafe routes. However, the main concern raised by the County Council road safety audit is with regards to lighting, street lighting, and that where the cycle path would meet existing highways, in this case Celadine Way, there is a lack of lighting. I note in the report Warwickshire County Council raised that this may mean in the dark cyclists could potentially collide with pedestrians. Warwickshire Highways has not objected to the application on the grounds that you adopt the following condition. Notwithstanding the plans submitted, no development shall commence until full details of signage and lighting as recommended in stage 1 and 2 of the safety audit have been submitted to and approved in writing by the council. The cycleway shall not be used until the signage and lighting have been laid out in accordance with the approved details. Such lighting and signage shall be permanently retained. So basically you'll need lighting and signage on the junction on Celadine Way where the cycle path will meet existing highways. In my opinion, whilst this condition is a fair one, I believe it would be completely impossible to achieve. Personally, parts of the Persimmons estate are not actually adopted, and in recent years this has caused misery for local residents, particularly around issues with roads and whatnot. So I think you really struggle to get an agreement in place with Persimmons by Thursday, and I don't actually believe that Celandine Way is actually adopted by the County Council yet. Equally, if it was, what guarantees have you got from the County Council or Persimmons to say that they'll pay for the street lighting? The £300,000 financial package from Arbery also does not include anything about street lighting. So I think to get an agreement in place before Thursday is pretty much impossible. There's been a concern about the loss of funding. I'm not a planning expert, but I don't believe that... is that 3 minutes?
It is, Councillor. Are there any points of clarification?
Okay.
Chairman,
Councillor Blackman.
can I ask you, you seem to have gone through some objections around lighting and signposting,
Yeah.
and saying you didn't think it would be put in place. Haven't we heard the officers talking about overcoming those difficulties as part of her presentation? You don't seem to have heard what the officer has said, that Warwickshire is prepared to make some provision where it considers it improves safety. Have you got anything to say about that?
Can I respond, Chair?
Yeah, it's seeking clarification from what you've said.
Yeah, of course. So the officer didn't actually say which council, so we don't know if that's Warwickshire County Council or the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. And what I was saying is that you've got to get some sort of agreement in place by Thursday the 22nd. You know, that's 2 days away. You know, shouldn't this have been done, you know, months ago? 2 days. It's impossible. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing one thing and I'm hearing something
Yeah,
else.
yes.
And that can be addressed when we get back to the
Yeah.
officer's time. Thank you. Sorry, is there any other points of clarification? No, okay. No. Claire Schofield.
Majority opinion is for the proposed cycle route to be built in the old mineral line to eradicate existing antisocial behaviour and provide cyclists with an enjoyable ride through history and nature, not a ride in front of residents' homes on an estate where there is already an existing cycle route accessible to the whole estate, including the 180 new dwellings as highlighted in pink on your maps. Whilst it is argued the mineral line is a wildlife corridor, the mineral line was a wildlife corridor 20 years ago when the original plans were made, yet that was not the reason it did not go ahead. This has been a public campaign and everyone has the right to their opinion, especially those who may be worse affected by this planning application. In total, the council agenda state 287 objections compared to 11 in support, clearly evidencing that this has not been a one-person campaign and that the concerns of residents, dog walkers and the public are real and valid. Can it be guaranteed that the path won't increase antisocial behaviour, won't provide an easy escape route for crime, won't encourage unwanted vehicles, won't risk public safety, pedestrians, children, dog walkers, dogs off leads and cows potentially mixing with a large number of bicycles reaching up to 40 miles an hour and motorbikes reaching up to 100 miles an hour? Fact. In the last month or so alone that we know of, cows have been on the land 3 times and motorbikes 4 times, most recent sighting videoed only yesterday. Can it be guaranteed there won't be a collision of such? Just to quote some comments from certain planning committee members last meeting, Elliot Gardens is already linked to a cycle path or Smorrel Lane. Motorbikes are practically 24/7 in that particular area. There's historically a problem there. There is no connection to Bedworth Park, it just stops. The idea and interconnection is misleading in many, many ways. I think what this application does show is that the planning application we have is bad planning condition. I think actually we probably let the residents down in the long run. What assessment has been conducted to assess the need for a new cycle path? The borough plan is understood, but the path will affect trees, bushes and wildlife, not to mention the great crested newts, which Warwickshire Wildlife Trust have confirmed will be present in the location of the path. The transport assessment states the existing cycle route provides a high standard of facilities for pedestrian and cycle trips to the east and towards Bedworth town. The council argues the route isn't necessarily available for young users, yet a dad and his 2 young children were seen using the route only this Sunday. Why was a legal agreement, I quote, specific to the provision of the route? What a wasted opportunity that the money could not be better spent on other community needs, such as expanding the size of local schools to accommodate new houses, a better path for dog walkers, more dog bins, upgrading the existing cycle route to make it available for young users despite it already being utilised by young users. Planning committee, as you are aware in your councillor's role, I quote, you have a unique and privileged position and potential to make a real difference to people's lives. Therefore, we would hope that you make the right decision for the residents and general public and not be influenced by money or the council.
Thank you. Perfect timing. Are there any points of clarification? It's all right, Deb.
Sorry.
No, okay.
Thank you.
Michelle Conlon.
Thank you. I'm chair of the Nuneaton and Bedworth Cycle Forum, and the biggest question I always get asked by people in Bedworth is why do we not have the cycle routes in Bedworth? So when this came up, I thought, wonderful, we're finally getting a good, cycle route that will link into and really help here. So and I didn't speak last time because I thought it was a no-brainer. It just seemed so obvious that it's actually something that is really beneficial. It was obviously put in as a condition for the Astley Lane development, which has already been approved, on the grounds of sustainability. And sustainability, includes transport and, getting people from A to B. A lot of the objections in this list of objections really do not, stack up. And I think that's something that Councillor Tandy brought up in the last meeting. It will increase traffic in the area. How? Cyclists actually, by people being on their bike rather than using their car, actually decrease, will increase litter, fly tipping and dog mess. Well, I don't know about all cyclists, so some may drop litter, I certainly didn't. You're not going to use your bicycle to go fly tipping, and we do not produce dog mess. Cycle route doesn't lead to anywhere. It does. I've cycled from the Nook across to Barkington, sort of going across Alice Close, Rectory Drive, by the side of the rugby ground, right across the bottom of the Miners' Welfare Park and up. It really does link into a lot of places, including going up towards Nicholas Chamberlain School. So I think it really would be shared use. Yes, there is a shared use along bits of Bluebell Drive to Smaller Lane, but anyone who regularly cycles knows that that's not as safe as a purely cycle pedestrian route, because it goes across roads and it goes across frontages, and I've been knocked off on a shared route that goes across an access because someone just wasn't looking. The previous speaker just mentioned about cyclists doing 40 miles per hour. How? We are certainly not in those sort of paths getting anything like that speed. So there's no problem about conflicts with cyclists and dog walkers. We've got the same thing on Wenbrook Trail, Weddington Trail, across Whittleford Park. These are all shared use cycle routes and available for walkers, dog walkers and things. And as was said in the officer's presentation, it's not just cyclists and walkers, it's people with pushchairs, people with mobility scooters. It allows for all those people to be using.
Are there any points of clarification? No. Okay, thank you. Councillor Connick.
Yeah, I'll do it from here. I see no planning reason this could possibly be refused. This is exactly the sort of thing that the National Planning Policies Framework says we should have. And the fact that they've got lots of issues with motorbikes, cows and all these other things is an existing issue. And actually having people legally walking on a tarmac path, cycling on a tarmac path, pushing buggies along the tarmac path, going a little jog along the tarmac path, will actually enforce people actually behaving. We have a link now between the Bellway site onto St Nicholas Park. Before that link was built, there were ewes hanging around in the hedge. Now we've got a walking route. Actually, the number of people walking along and cycling along there, mostly walking, actually reduces the antisocial behaviour. The people causing trouble do not want to be in the same area as the tarmac path with people pushing buggies and a general thoroughfare. Actually, people walking and cycling on a tarmac path that's open all year reduces fly tipping because people fly tipping are spotted. Actually, opening the area up, as long as you've got the barriers so it actually isn't open to vehicles, actually produces less crime and less problems. We also talk about nature. We went to walk along there. It's a very broad bit of grass, trampled massively at each end. If you actually have a tarmac path, you actually put all the walking on a 2 or 3 metre wide section. Therefore, the damage to the grass and the walking is concentrated. So actually, the flowers and the wildlife, the bees burrowing in the grass, is actually better to have a narrow tarmac path, and then the grass can go wilder. And it really does make a difference. So we've got these paths all over the borough. There are areas where there's antisocial behaviour, areas where there's motorbikes, the same whether you've got a path or not. But what a path does is allow the legitimate people to take their children to school, and the vast majority of people, these are actually walking routes where 5 or 10% of people cycle. They're not long distance routes, it's not part of the Tour de France. Yeah, people aren't going to. These are little routes that people go to school on from the housing. On a nice day, they might go on a Sunday walk along here. This is an absolutely superb idea, and the one thing I would say is we could make the path 2.5 metres. The Wenton Trail was made 3 metres at the top and 2.5 metres at the bottom. 2.5 metres is perfectly fine for cycling and walking routes, and why waste that 0.5 metre of extra tarmac? So I'm more than happy for the route to be narrowed where it can be, because we don't want more tarmac than we need. But about 2.5 metres is a very pleasant route, not too much an eyesore, And if you just widen it 3 metres where it goes through a barrier of the chicanes and things, and narrow to 2.5 metres on the straight bit across the grass, that will actually, I think, break up the visual impact.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any points of clarification? No? Okay, thank you. Jackie, anything at this point?
Okay. What Councillor Evans raised about having the agreement about the lighting before Thursday, we don't have to do that. That is a condition that we can sort out at a later date. Highways are obviously aware of it because they've actually asked for it. This could potentially, and we've actually agreed to pay, the Parks team have agreed to actually finance the lighting in that area because we couldn't ask the developer to actually do that. It's likely to be possibly in a couple of years' time when the development takes place. I would think the road may be adopted by then anyway. As I say, it's a condition that we can do at a later stage. Okay?
Can I just add one thing to pick up Councillor Kondarka's point about the 3 metres, because it's quite important. The 3 metres is the County Council's adoptable standard for cycle, double-use cycle and pedestrian pathways. The intention would be that the County Council will, at some point, we will dedicate the path for adoption by the County Council so it becomes a highway maintainable at public expense, which is why it's 3 metres.
Not enforced anyway.
Okay, thank you.
No, that's sorry, Chair, but that's why it is what it is.
Okay, I'm not going to have a...
Okay. In terms of what Miss Field said about the gutting always being for biodiversity, it's increasing national legislation as time's gone on that we have to take into consideration biodiversity. It's strengthened, especially with the new NPPFs that have come out now, national guidance that have come out. About the money being used elsewhere, again, this is specific for the path, but I assure you, as part of that 2017, there would have been money put aside for education, for possibly health at the time, and other such things. This was specifically because it was a sustainable route. They're different pots of money for different things. So it wasn't they would provide this and they wouldn't provide money put towards education. It's not either or. It's we look at all the contributions that were requested. I think that was probably all the points I needed.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. In which case, can I, from the Chair, move the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. Is that seconded?
I'll second that, Chair.
Any member? Councillor Beaumont.
Sorry, Chair.
All right.
Chair, I mean, I'm a cyclist. I've cycled up to Smorrel Lane from Bulkington, as one of our speakers has mentioned. And I could see this route as a reasonably attractive one, and would add to my experience of the countryside and the areas that in that particular patch. And I must say, as cycling as we do along canal paths where we often meet dogs, or very narrow track, there is not an issue with dogs. Dogs are largely, generally speaking, quite well behaved. They're under the full control of their owner, and they should not be running around loose anyway. So I don't really have an issue with this. All the reasons given by the officer for supporting this application, I think, are excellent ones, and in terms of ecology, it does offer the right preservation for the areas in the cutting. So I think it's an excellent offer. It's significant amounts of money promised by developers and gathered up ready for this work to be done. So I think it would be an awful tragedy if we didn't take this opportunity of carrying out this work.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for the officers because perhaps I've misunderstood something that you said. hopefully you can clarify for me. You said that the street light could be conditioned.
Yes.
The parks team have agreed to pay. But also the council was likely, and the key word for me is likely, to adopt the land. What if the council doesn't adopt the land? Is the parks team still going to pay for that lighting?
We would adopt the land, the parks team or the council would adopt the land, and we would pay for those lights. We've already given our agreement to that.
So this council has a written agreement to adopt that land?
Yes, we have.
Okay, because it's not always a guarantee in planning applications that the council will adopt that land. So that was a concern of mine. Also, and this is probably going to be a strange question, but when I opened my emails to see a picture of a cow, it wasn't exactly the email I was expecting to receive. Is there anything that can be done about boundary treatment on this? Because I accept that we can't do anything about the cows now, it's an existing problem, but if we are going to be putting more people down that route, because hopefully you wouldn't want to spend £330,000 for no one extra to go down that route. I am concerned, particularly for cyclists, and we're trying to encourage more cyclists. If they hit the backside of an Aberdeen Angus, it's going to hurt. So, is there anything we can do about that?
There are restrictors anyway that I think a cow would find quite difficult to get through. If we're restricting a motorbike, then a cow or something won't be able to get through. We couldn't insist on fences on either side of the fence because that would be unsafe. It wouldn't leave anyone with anywhere to go if there was an issue. So if you put a fence up and then something is causing an obstruction, you then don't have a means to get around it. At the moment, it's just a path in an open space, so if you see something, you will have the ability to get around it.
I know it's a strange. It does concern me though, Chair, because we don't know where they're coming through, so there's no guarantee that you can force it, or the cow's natural route will be through wherever you put the access and egress. I don't mind, Chair, having what I've said quoted. I'm perfectly happy to say I'm the last person on this list that you have agreed to share, but it is not giving a true reflection of what I don't think it's a true reflection of what all councillors say. I know it is, and I know it is the purpose of the speaker to try and present an argument, and we all do that. You did that all last night, I'm quite sure. But when it comes to a planning application, when you're sitting in a quasi-judicial function, I think it is important to reflect that. And there were other things I said on the other side of the argument at the last debate, particularly about shared spaces, that this proposed route would be for cyclists, dog walkers, pushchair users, wheelchair users, whatever. And also the railway line argument I remember raising. This application isn't a multiple choice, Chair. It is an either or. We either have it or we don't. We can't have a wish list saying, I don't want it here but I want it there. That isn't on offer. Many a time I've sat here and wished it was on planning. So whether I wanted to or not, I couldn't put the route into the proposed, what is being suggested as the old railway line. And I would have severe reservations about doing so even if it was on offer, because it is a potential wildlife site. It may have been suitable 20 years ago, but the information I'm being given is that it isn't now. And that there are proposals that, it'd be better to ride down there through nature, but in order to ride through that nature, you would probably have to destroy that nature to make it suitable to actually work. Proposals, I think, were mentioned about raising the height of the land. Well, that's going to ruin the ecology of the land straight off, and actually ruin some of the things that the residents would probably want to retain and the users would want to retain. But that site has evolved over 20 years to be more biologically and ecologically worthy of saving than it probably was 20 years ago. At the moment, unless anyone can give me a planning reason, and that is the key thing here, a planning reason, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to reject this. I can perfectly understand residents' views and feelings on this, but they haven't, unfortunately, provided me, as far as I can see, a planning reason to refuse it, unless any other member of this committee is going to provide me with one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other member? Councillor Glass.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's, once again, we talk about the old railway line and what happened 20 years ago. It wasn't the fact that that it was the particular problem was Iron Bridge. Anybody who knows the area was trying to get some insurance on that Iron Bridge. Because I can assure you, when we had talks with Abbey Estates, they were willing to give us a whole lot all the way down to the Newdigate Arm. Opening the bridge at Coventry Road, because it's only backfilled, and I say I've got enough ex-miners that could do that without any particular problems. And there was even talk once upon a time about a light railway. If we could possibly try and get that from the Newdigate Arm all the way up to a heritage site, old Newdigate Pit, etc., etc. All those things fell through. It wasn't going to happen. And since that time, nature has indeed taken its course. And as I said before, I think I can stand to be corrected that there's only two parts of Warwickshire that you can actually see the stratification. One's Colley Rocks and one's the Newdigate mineral line, particularly on the right hand side. If you walk from the Nook down the right hand side, you can see the stratification all the way to the My concerns again, Chair, is that the road finishes at Heath Road. If you're going on a bike to the bottom of Heath Road, you've got to turn left up another 500 yards up to the next footpath, which goes to the right hand side off the estate, down to the A444. Then it goes along the A444, underneath the A444, and then back onto the estate that you know perfectly well. And then you're going to go further up onto another footpath that takes you up to the back of the rugby club, the old rugby club. So it's not exactly a straight line all the way to Bedworth. It's you know, it's like that. And I haven't heard anything about trying to deal with anything along with the other footpath that it would, particularly along the A444. Although it is part tar macadam that particular part, but there doesn't seem to be an upgrade in that. So I know it's planning reasons that we've got to look at this, and I find it with a heavy heart also what to do with this. I shall probably vote against it, Chair, on the point that I think we're going to miss something that we could do something a wee bit better. And I haven't got planning reasons to do that, but I think if we can turn around and get something done from the mineral railway line at the bottom of Heath Road all the way to Bedworth, up to the Newdigate Arm, that would be another argument for the people who live on the left-hand side of that particular junction. So there's problems all over the place with this, Chair, and with a heavy heart I would have to vote against it.
Just to clarify, Councillor Glass, you mentioned the route being quite convoluted and going up towards the A444. That's not actually correct. In the agenda, there is a plan that shows the route, and at the end of the Smorrell Lane Heath Road junction, you can cross over the road there and go through into Alice Close, through then onto Smarts Road, past Bedworth Rugby Club, up Rectory Drive, cross over, and you're in the Miners Welfare Park. So it's not a convoluted route.
Thank you.
So John, it's fine.
Thank you. Councillor Pack.
Sorry.
Councillor Llewellyn Nash.
Yeah, I have concerns about this route. I went myself and visited the route where it would particularly impact on private dwellings, and I was surprised at how close to the houses that this route was going to take, and it was quite a large bit. I'm also quite concerned about 3 metres wide. That is quite a substantial width, so it would almost be like a small main road going past your house. You know, people have bought these houses because of the sense of open space the quietness, listening to the birds instead of other things going on, and also listening tonight. I do have concerns, just as Councillor Glass has just said, about some of the routes and safety concerns. You know, I'm particularly thinking about, you know, a couple of parents out on their bike and they've got 2 children, one goes ahead, they can't catch up, and goodness knows what could happen. So I think on this particular planning, I'm going to also have to object.
Councillor Woodkin.
Thank you, Chair. It's a difficult one, and I've been and seen the area a couple of times. I live not far, but I too agree with Councillor Wilson. I can't see anything in planning to turn this down. I appreciate the concerns of the residents, but I will be supporting this application.
Councillor Pomfrey.
Thank you, Chair. A lot has been said about sustainability. It's a multi-syllable word, but in practical terms, what does this really mean in this particular area? Smorrel Lane, a very busy road, much busier because of the Bluebell development, and I'm sure when the application for that development and the Astley Lane one now were in, the people who live on Smorrel Lane were very worried, not about somebody pushing buggies past their house, but the increase in traffic. The Smorrel Lane has been widened to accommodate traffic lights. I don't know what the people near there think about that. There are 2 other points where the development joins the pre-existing highway network. Parts of Smorrel Lane are very narrow indeed, but the residents there are putting up with hundreds probably of extra car journeys going past their doors every day. That would have been one of the reasons why the approval, when it was given, because of the considering the interests of the wider community. I think we would be letting the residents of the wider community down if we said, okay, well the development is there now, and what you thought might happen, well, we're just not going to go ahead with that anymore. The sustainability of Astley Lane, well, if I was living there and had every journey to get in the car because I didn't fancy walking with or without a buggy along the road there, because there's no connection to the cycle path which we're talking about, I would have to go everywhere in the car. That is not sustainability. I think this is a vital link. I think it provides a benefit for people who live on the Bluebell Drive development, because they don't all oppose this development. Many of them don't live near the affected areas, and it's certainly a benefit to the Astley Lane future residents, and it's certainly of benefit to the people who live on Smorrel Lane. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move to the vote now, but just before I do, I just wanted to clarify 2 points. I just wanted us to be absolutely clear on the adoption process. If it was approved tonight, that adoption would be by this authority in line with the 106 agreement. And also in relation to the funding of it, it's absolutely clear that this money couldn't be used for something else. And in relation to other contributions that were made during the development period of the housing, there was a contribution in the region of £860,000 towards education. I just thought you might want to know that. Okay then, the recommendation has been moved and seconded, and that's to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? And against? 1.
That's approved.
There's no abstention, so that's approved. then takes us on to item number 3, which is the site of the former Red Ruby restaurant. Jackie, thank you.
Sorry, that's all right, it's okay. This application is for the demolition of the Ratcliffe and Red Ruby, formerly known as the Crazy Horses, buildings on Tuttle Hill, and for the erection of a new 3-storey 78-bedroom nursing and dementia care home with kitchen and laundry facilities and with parking to the rear. The Ratcliffe building is an old engineering building built for the quarry and is partly vacant, with one plant hire company still occupying the building. The Red Ruby is the former public house nightclub, which was lastly used as a restaurant and has been vacant for many years. That's the public house, and these are the Ratcliffe buildings we're on about. The existing buildings are immediately on the footpath on Tuttle Hill. To the rear and west of the site is new residential development. To the east is the canal. On the opposite side is the industrial units and access to the Regent building, and beyond to the tip. It's across there. The canal's just there. Notwithstanding the levels of objection, the application has been reported to Planning Application Committee at the request of Councillor Condercourt. The public objection is preceding your agenda, but relates largely to the impact of the neighbouring residential properties, such as the size of building, loss of privacy, light and noise nuisance, security concerns, odours from bins, devaluation of property, traffic congestion and safety issues from the demolition. The Council considers the impacts are the housing, land supply and need, the loss of employment site, the impact on visual amenity, including the design, the impact on residential amenity, noise and pollution, and flooding and drainage. Highway safety, the impact on biodiversity, geology and historic interests, and planning obligations that should be provided. In relation to housing need, the NPPF establishes the need for sustainable development, and the location is considered sustainable, and it is on a bus route. It's a short distance from the town centre and Abbey Green, and is adjacent to the canal. The Council currently does not have a 5-year supply of deliverable housing to meet the identified housing need. Government guidance advises that councils must count housing provided for older people, including residential institutions in use, which is Class 2, against the housing requirement. The NPPF states that refusal cannot be justified on the grounds of prematurity if the site is sustainable and where it cannot be demonstrated that there would be a substantial or cumulative detrimental impact. It is therefore considered that there is an established housing need for this type of development within the borough. In relation to the loss of employment site, Save Local policy states that the loss of the site is acceptable if it provides a beneficial use of derelict, waste or underutilised land. The site includes a partly vacant industrial unit which does not appear to have been fit for modern industrial occupation, and a pub restaurant that has been vacant for many years. It is therefore considered that there are no grounds to refuse the application based on the loss of employment site. In relation to visual amenity, the buildings to be demolished are in a poor state and prominent on this approach into town. The Ratcliffe building in particular provides a dominant tall feature immediately at the back of the footpath. The proposed building is to be taller but will be set back from the highway and separated from it by a low-level railing fence similar to the adjacent residential development. That's the adjacent residential development that I'm referring to, which has a slight setback. In terms of height, the new building is fairly tall, being 13.5 metres to the ridge, so taller than the immediate 2.5-storey houses that you can see there. But the ridge line is varied along the road. You can see the actual industrial units, although they're fairly lower there, they are quite taller at the back. The existing buildings, as I say, are shown there, are immediately adjacent. The Ratcliffe buildings, the residential properties are immediately adjacent to this and are set back by that 2.5 metres. Where the buildings next to these, leading into Corraine Road, shown on the top right, those are those houses there, and then you see that slight setback, and where this leads into the new development, and that's Corraine Road, they do actually go up to 3 storeys in height. The proposal will provide an elevation relief and is designed reminiscent of an older industrial building. It's the front elevation to the road there, with arch windows and a clock tower closest to the canal to provide visual interest. Materials are to be smooth red brick facing brick, grey slate effect, roofing tiles, granite effect stone cladding and a grey colour cladding panels. The building will provide a standalone landmark close to this bridge into town. In relation to impact on residential amenity, there are residential properties around, adjacent to the site, to the rear, southwest, and to the side, northwest. This here is the actual existing building of Ratcliffe. You can see the actual, this is the building line, goes all the way up to these properties. That's the public house or the former the restaurant there. The properties to the rear on Sheeling Crescent, that's those properties there, are separated from the existing building by their rear gardens, which are approximately 9.5 to 10 metres long. The proposal is to retain a 1.8 metre high rear boundary wall. There is currently no overlooking from the industrial use, and the proposed building is to be set well off the rear boundary. Probably the better one to show you the actual building. I'm sorry, it's a very busy drawing, but the actual building is set back there. Probably easier on there. These are some of the existing buildings shown around the existing industrial units. You can see there's no windows there, but it is quite a tall building to have right at the bottom of your garden. The property that is closest to the new care home is 25 Sheeling Crescent. Sheeling Close, isn't it? Sorry, not Crescent. That is that building there, those dwellings there. That is the closest part of the building to those properties. And it's separated by just over 25 metres from the communal lounge, which is that, at ground floor. Above this, the communal lounge area, the building itself is actually set back at the first floor level by a further 6.5 metres. So it complies with the residential design distance of 30 metres from building to building. Nonetheless, the flat roof area created by this ground floor projection there is to be used as a balcony. However, as there is a 25 metre separation, this level of separation is acceptable and in compliance with the 7 metres set out in the residential design guide. The rest of the building easily complies with the separation standards required in the residential design guide. There are properties on Corraine Road that also back onto the site. Probably the Google Maps is the best ones to demonstrate those. Those are the buildings that are closest to the industrial unit at the moment. This is number 21 and 23. These properties, as I say, are close to the industrial unit at the moment, as you can see there. These properties will back on to the proposed bin store. However, these properties, as I say, currently back onto the tall industrial building at less than a 7 metre separation distance. The existing industrial building is much taller, as you can see, than the proposed bin store. In fact, the proposed bin store is only going to be 2.5 metres in height. Whilst the bin store does not achieve this 12 metre separation distance normally required from the rear windows of those properties, it is considered to be a huge betterment than the effect currently felt by the 2-storey industrial unit in terms of light and sense of enclosure. The other property affected by the proposal is number 90 Tuttle Hill. It's probably easy to again show it on there. That's the property just there. This property is immediately adjacent to the buildings that are to be demolished. That's the one there. It runs entirely along the curtilage of the garden of that property. You can just see it at the back there. The access to the parking at the rear of the site is to be, or the proposed access is to be adjacent to this property. In terms of the level of light entering this property, the demolition of the industrial unit will be greatly beneficial. In terms of overlooking, there are windows proposed to the east elevation, the end elevation there, but these are proposed to be windows to a stairwell and a bathroom. And in any case, these will not provide any sense of loss of privacy because they'll be fronting onto the side of that property, which has no windows. It is therefore considered that there are no grounds to refuse the proposal on the impact on residential amenity. In relation to noise and pollution, the existing land use means that standard contamination conditions are appropriate. Noise and acoustic statements have been submitted due to the noise from the highway. This concludes that sealed windows and mechanical ventilation is required to the front and the side elevations. This can be conditioned. In relation to the disturbance to 90 Tuttle Hill due to the new vehicular access immediately adjacent to their property, it is considered that disturbance can be mitigated by an acoustic fence, and it is considered acceptable and has been agreed that this can be conditioned. In addition, where the gates are, here, the vehicular gates, this has been conditioned as per the addendum to be of low level noise. You can actually get processes so they don't clink or make a noise as they're moving apart or closing. Consideration also has to be given that whilst the existing buildings are either not used or have small usage, new commercial enterprises for engineering and restaurant use could move into these properties and operate immediately at these buildings, which in their own right would bring noise and disturbance to the neighbouring properties. It is therefore considered that conditions can make the proposal acceptable in terms of noise and acoustic disturbance to the surrounding properties. In reference to the flooding, the proposal is flood zone 1, which is the least risk of flooding. In relation to highway safety, county highways have no objection subject to conditions. Car parking provision is proposed at 46 spaces, which complies with policy. In addition, cycle racks and spaces for motorcycles have been provided. It is considered that the built-up nature of the site means there will be no biodiversity lost. County Archaeology have requested that some of the buildings have reference to Nuneaton historical past, so the documentation of the buildings and land is required prior to the demolition and development. The only planning obligations that have been requested are contributions towards George Eliot Hospital Trust and for advanced nursing practice training. The applicant has agreed to pay both contributions. Please refer to page 53 of the agenda for the information. In conclusion, it is considered that the proposal isn't in accordance with national and local guidance, and that committee is recommended to approve the application subject to the conditions as printed on the agenda and addendum and subject to a 106 legal agreement for the contributions requested. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Constable.
Thank you very much, Chair. I take a great interest in this paper because it's quite a significant bit of care homes. I always disagree with the comment about 5-year land supply because obviously it's a big can of worms. But in terms of care homes, we desperately do need care homes. We're building lots of homes, but not building the care homes we desperately need. And this has 78 beds, and it particularly includes dementia, so that is a real plus for this application. On the negative side, it will put a lot more traffic through the air quality zone, which is why I was quite keen to ask the officers about cycle storage, not just for visitors, because obviously a lot of people visit care homes, but particularly for staff, because poorly paid staff, care facilities, that many, there will be some people who will want to visit it by bicycle, and the staff parking is covered, which is really important. This is actually on the Coventry Canal and hopefully on the cycle route through to Wellington by Stony Lane one day, and the cycle route up through Camp Hill. So it could be a very big bonus for this borough. At the moment, a lot of people needing this sort of care get sent to North Warwickshire. There's one up Albury Road. There's a site on the A5 that is closing, a care home. There's lots of small care homes, some which are closing, others of which are quite a distance away. So generally, I'm very supportive of this application. I asked it to go to committee originally because it didn't have anywhere for cyclists, and with 78 beds, there's enough visitors to actually justify the cycling. The officers have taken that on board and asked the applicant, who've agreed to cycle storage, and importantly cycle storage for the staff. And I do think it's actually quite a good reuse of the building and quite a good location. It is a very big building, but that does mean it is actually more viable in terms of a care home, because you've obviously got the economies of scale. And particularly for the transport, Abbey Green is breaching the air quality limits at a few of the houses. We've got no frontage. And if we can actually try and get people to go to this site, the visitors, the people in there, by bus, by bicycle, and actually a lot of people are visiting at the weekend when there's less public transport, I think it's a good thing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any points of clarification? Yep.
Not from Keith's side. No.
Sorry?
No, sorry.
Threw me out.
Sorry.
Jackie, anything you need to come back
No, I
on?
don't think so, no.
Okay then. To enable debates to take place, can I move the recommendation which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed? Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Councillor Sargent.
Can I ask Jackie, the 8-foot wall that you were saying was round the back, is that looked on by other properties?
The proposed wall, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, that will be, obviously, instead of having that 2-storey or 2.5-storey industrial unit.
Councillor Tandy.
I've been looking through the highway stuff and I'm a little confused as to actually where the access to the property will be. I understand, that you've got the car parking there, but a bit confused about actually where the access is.
Okay.
Do you want to zoom in a bit on that?
Yes. Do you mean the vehicular or the pedestrian?
I don't, vehicular.
It's actually there, which if you should see on the red line is there, it's next to number 90 Tuttle Hill.
There are currently 3 points of access to this site.
Yeah, I read that, but there's only
those
one.
are closing. There is
Yeah.
now to be one, which is furthest away from the canal bridge to improve visibility.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really supportive of this, but there's just one niggling doubt which I'm hoping that officers can clarify for me. It's mainly a health and safety point really, with relation to the dementia, because I do have a concern with dementia being on a busy road and close to a canal, that those are particular problems if someone was to inadvertently get out if they're unsupervised or whatever. It shouldn't happen, but it can happen. Where will the dementia wing be in there? Have they said?
They haven't said which wing is to be which, but they will obviously have to be bound by their own regulations in terms of how the development is dealt with and managed.
Is there any, I suppose the answer is going to be no, but I need to ask it anyway. Is there any way we can condition that the dementia wing is the furthest away from the road and the canal?
Unfortunately not. The site is bounded by sort of by fencing anyway, so they can't get access to the canal from this site, and there is no front door, so if the residents do get out, they can't get out immediately to the front because of air quality concerns, so they can only get out to the rear, and then there are gates across the access, so I would say it's fairly well contained in relation to making sure that there isn't any escapees from the site.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because it is a concern with it being in that particular area where if anyone was to get out, I think it is a really good improvement actually on what is there. I think it's long overdue, and subject to those things where you've given me those assurances that there are those there, I'm more than happy to support it.
In answer to Chris's, most dementia rooms are on the upper floor these days, on the first floor, and they all have double locked doors, so you have to go through one secure door and another secure door. It's very difficult for a dementia patient to get out. Like other people, I see this as an improvement on what's there at the moment. And as for the odours from bins, I mean, these things are, you know, there's a lot of health and safety involved in the what to call it, the disposable of clinical waste. I mean, it's a very health and safety thing. I suppose my only concern would be the size of it. It looks, whether these drawings are out of scale or something, but it looks absolutely enormous compared to what is there at the moment. You know, I know the pub and that would be my only concern, I think. And you know, that is a very busy road as well. You know, with people going to the tip and what have you, and making their way up to other places as well. But apart from that, it's a definite improvement to what's there at the moment.
Okay, thank you. It's a particularly interesting one because I think everybody in the borough knows that site for one reason or another. You just go into the tip up to the level. And there's one thing, it's maybe not strictly a planning consideration, but one thing that there can be no doubt of is that there's a need for dementia care within this borough.
Yeah.
Considering the percentage of people in our borough of an increasing age now, to put it like that, we have very few real care homes that can deal with dementia. Certainly I know of people that have had to go right down the A5 door to the way. I can't remember exactly where the place was. And this will give some local provision for local people, and it's why when I hear Councillor Condacor mentioning about the cycle access, well, you wouldn't want to be going to the loo too many times on a bike.
You get down fast.
But to get to this one, hopefully, if it's local people that are using this place, if it's approved, then also it'll be local people getting there and hopefully not using their own cars but public transport, cycles, etc. The actual, I think you can also not doubt that it will be an improvement to that site. You know, it's laying pretty much derelict for years, so it would probably be a better visual amenity. I have to say, when I first looked at it, and of course things don't replicate very well on the, you know, the printed paper and stuff, is I wasn't convinced about the design of it. It is an imposing building. It is pretty much up onto the pavement, and I think we've learnt by one of our mistakes just a bit further up with our houses, a bit further up that are of poor design and almost onto the pavement. And we made a mistake with them probably, and I don't want us to do it with this. But I've got no doubt it's partly down to the functional nature of the building, but also I understand better now because of what's been said. It's also trying to put back some of the industrial heritage of the area. Whether that's doing enough or not, I'm not sure. It's trying, but for anybody that's been around, maybe none of you have been around as long as me, but I can remember when they done the care home up around the corner by the bull ring, Harmony House. We actually put a condition at the time to retain the old industrial steel windows in that, and it was good. So I think there's a balance between wanting to improve it, wanting to get the care that we need, and possibly about the design. I'm going to be voting for it, and I hope that it will meet that. Well, it will meet that need. But if I have a concern, it's about the size of the building up onto the pavement. But hopefully, my concerns will be proved wrong. Right. Okay. The recommendation has been moved and seconded, and that's to grant planning permission subject to the legal agreement and the conditions printed. All those in favour of that?
That's unanimous.
Okay.
And I hope I never have to go
Yes. If we can move on to item, if we can move on to item number 4 then, which is 167 Western Lane, Hawkinson.
This application is for the erection of 3 detached bungalows on garden land to the rear of 167 Western Lane, and includes alterations to 167 to enable adequate vehicular access to the site. The application site currently consists of a residential garden which is proposed to be subdivided and 3 new bungalows sited on it. This is a full application, so the design and layout are being considered as part of the proposal. Number 167 is a semi-detached property and is set back from Western Lane by some distance. That's the existing property there, and that's obviously the curtilage of their garden. The detached bungalow next door at 169 Western Lane, there, is set much closer to Western Lane. The curtilage of 167, as I say, is very large, forming an L shape, and has a narrow access to the side leading into the rear garden. This access is proposed to be widened by the partial demolition of the house and narrowing of the existing house, the rebuilding of it as well. The adjoining property, 165, has a single-storey extension to the rear. The rear gardens at different points abounds gardens of properties in the paddocks, which is here, and Kingsley Crescent to the south. There have been 10 forms of communication of objection from 6 addresses and a petition of 7 signatories. The objections are praised on the agenda, page 66 and 67, and include highway and traffic concerns, pressure on drainage and increased risk of flooding, loss of residential amenity and impact of noise to neighbours, over-intensive development and precedent for other garden land, concerns about subsidence, loss of biodiversity for wildlife, security concerns. See, the key issues are there in front of you. In relation to the principle of residential development, the proposed 3 new bungalows would be located to the rear of the built form on Western Lane. just see the proposed dwellings there. As I say, that's the existing property there. The site is currently garden land. Residential gardens are no longer classed as previously developed land in the NPPF, which means it is not designated as brownfield land. This proposed development would represent residential use in an urban area, and as previously advised, the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5 years housing supply. The NPPF states there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. In broad terms, this means that the application should be approved, providing that it's in accordance with the development plan and other policies, unless material considerations or adverse impacts indicate otherwise. In reference to residential amenity within the development itself, the 3 bungalows relate well to one another. That's a garage there. And distance standards are met within the site. The sites which face onto each other either have no habitable room windows or have obscure windows or windows which serve secondary windows which serve the same room. In relation to existing properties, the proposals are single storey, so overlooking can be dealt with via a fence. The bungalows are 12 metres to 16 metres away from the original rear elevations of the dwellings in Kingsley Crescent, shown there. This complies with the 12-metre distance set out in the residential design guide. In relation to 19A, the paddocks, which is this house here, or dwelling there, the proposal will be 1.2 to 1.4 with the southeast side boundary of this neighbour's rear garden. In other words, the nearest bungalow there is to be built approximately 1.4 metres from the site boundary, and will therefore be parallel with this neighbour's garden. Therefore, there will be some form of sense of enclosure. Notwithstanding these impacts, in most cases, it is the eaves of these proposed properties that are nearest to the existing neighbours, and the proposed eaves are to be relatively low at 2.5 metres. This means that the eaves will be no higher than the taller part of an outbuilding that could be built as normal permitted development. In relation to visual, amenity and character, the proposal is to be accessed via a long narrow drive which meets Western Lane to the north. The siting of the proposed dwellings are well removed from the built form and active frontage of Western Lane, and the bungalows will have no road frontage for themselves. It is considered that this is backland development, out of character and not in keeping with the area. It is considered that the site fails to integrate fully with the established character of the surrounding area, and there is not enough proposed dwellings to create a character of its own. The NPPF states permission should be refused for development that fails to take the opportunities available for improving the character and quality of an area and the way it functions. A recent refusal and subsequent appeal on nearby Mill Lane for only one bungalow was refused on the grounds of the impact on the character and upheld by the inspector, stating the development's failure to integrate with the surrounding pattern of development means it would contrast harmfully with the character and appearance of the area. It therefore would conflict with policies ENV 14 of the Nuneaton and Bedworth local plan, the council's residential design guide, and paragraph 127 of the NPPF, which all aims to ensure development is in keeping with the character of the local built environment. This recent appeal is therefore a material consideration in the determining of this application. You will see from the Google plan there are 2 roads with development of Western Lane in close proximity to the site. One is the paddocks, which is there, which has 23 houses off the road, and that includes the private drive, that small area there, to these bungalows there, or to these houses there, and Farndon Close, which is over there, which has 11 dwellings of it. It is considered that just 3 dwellings does not provide the same cohesiveness as these larger groups. Therefore, it's considered that the proposal is contrary to policy and be detrimental to the visual character of the area by way of its poor siting and backland location, and would fail to relate or integrate with the surrounding established pattern of development. In relation to impact on highways, highways have no objection to the amended plans, and it now shows a bin collection area towards the front of the site. It's actually just there. The drag distance for the bins exceeds the recommended distance of 30 metres, but it will be a little bit of buyer beware. The agent has stated that a third-party waste management contractor would be appointed to move the bins from each dwelling to the curbside collection point. How this would work in reality is not known. In reference to flood risk, it is the zone of the lowest risk of flooding. The impact on ecology, the council's parks teams have not responded. The garden does have a lot of trees and shrubs, but these could be cleared at any time, and wildlife legislation would protect nesting birds and bats. As such, it has to be considered that there would not be a significant impact on ecology. In conclusion, whilst most impacts are considered acceptable, it is considered that the proposal is contrary to policy and would be detrimental to the character of the area. The recommendation is therefore refusal for the reasons as printed on pages 70 and 71 of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Buckley.
Good evening, my name is Darrell Buckley and I'm here tonight to represent the residents of Bulkington's 46 to 58 Kingsley Crescent, who strongly object to the proposed building of 3 bungalows on backland at the rear of 167 Western Lane. Before I outline the residents' objections, I would like to begin with a short history of the proposed site, which may be of some help in decision making. In the late 1950s, the Drury Building Company purchased nearly all the land for Cleveland Road Estate in Bulkington. Plans were made and boundary fences were erected on the site, and a show house was also completed. Prospective buyers of the properties bought off plan. All the even numbered houses in Kingsley Crescent plots stretched the ends of the gardens of the properties in Western Lane. Mr. Jakes, the then owner of the 167, held land in the middle of the proposed estate, which he refused to sell, preventing building work progressing. Mr. Jakes was not interested in money. He wanted the equivalent area of land made available adjacent to his property. He therefore made arrangements with Drury's to take the proposed land off the existing plans from existing numbers 48 to 58 Kingsley Crescent, which explains why we have some of the smallest gardens on the estate. Buyers were also advised that Mr. Jakes would only be using the land as an allotment for growing vegetables. Mr. Jakes agreed, and the allotments were used for 15 years or so before it was allowed to grass over and was used to house a pony belonging to Mr. Welsh, his son-in-law. Unfortunately, the land became puddled due to the Bulkington clay, which caused flooding to the gardens and properties of 54 to 56. Worst affected was number 58, where water entered through the air bricks and flooded the property. Mr. Welsh was informed and allowed the owner of 58 to purchase land which was originally on the boundary plan. Mr. Welsh then planted a screen of trees between his property, 48 to 58, which alleviated the flooding problem. Now we have a proposal to cover this land with tar macadam and buildings with a suggestion that soak away for drainage would be sufficient. It is obvious of the plans that most, if not all, of the trees on the site would be destroyed in order to shoehorn in the development. With a warning of global warming and extreme weather situations expected, the proposed development could turn out to be a disaster waiting to happen. The biggest cause for concern of the residents is loss of screen of trees, mature trees, now the rear of their properties. The land behind the trees were turned into an orchard and a nature garden by Mr. Welsh, which later maintained by Mr. Jakes Jr. until he died. The widow then sold the house to 167 to the proposed building speculator, who only saw the land as a building plot, irrespective of the environmental impact that plans would have on the community. The land and trees, which have developed over many years, along with the wildlife in the area, has proved to be a total joy to the residents I represent. Many kinds of bird and mammals have all been had their homes at this place.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. there any points of clarification? No, thank you very much. John Craddock.
I just wanted to...
Point of clarification to the last speaker.
Oh, okay, sorry.
What was it?
I just wanted to see where the back garden was to the
the offices, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'll
deal with it.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was for it's okay, Mr. Buckley, thank you. Right, whilst Mr. Craddock is speaking, we'll ask the officer to put that piece up that you were asking about. Mr. Craddock. Mr. Chairman, my name is John Craddock of Craddock Architects, and I represent the owner of number 167 Western Lane, which has a very long garden behind the house and further garden to the east and west. I've now worked with and for this local authority for some 55 years, and as a result have had a good working relationship with your officers. I'm afraid that on this application we agree to differ. With reference to our email to your officer Darren Grant, 17th of October 2018, and our drawing 09B, you will see that there are 3 bungalows, numbers 5, 6 and 7, at the end of cul-de-sac known as Farmden Close, which are accessed by a private road which is off the turning head of the adopted road. The Paddocks has 2 dwellings, number 17 and 19A, with access drives off an adopted turning head. The sites of these 2 dwellings and also numbers 15, 21 and 23 are either very close or abut our client's site, and together, for character, will make a cluster of dwellings. Both Farmden and the Paddocks are built on what were very, very long rear gardens, and of course were the subject of planning approval by your authority and Warwickshire County Council in years gone by. The application before you is no different. Number 167 Marston Lane has a very, very long garden, and even more at the end, which adjoins 19A the Paddocks. The 5 metre wide private access road is as required and approved by Warwickshire County Council Highways and is off an adopted road, Marston Lane. The private road will initially serve 3 bungalows, just the same as Farmden Close. Your officers often talk about and try and obtain similar, if not the same, patterns of development in an area. I suggest that our proposals are the same pattern as has evolved over the years on adjoining and nearby sites. These nearby sites are indeed good planning precedents to support an approval for the scheme before you. Mr. Chairman, should your councillors be in any doubt, sat here looking at plans, I suggest that they can always have a site visit to the 3 sites to have a closer look. Thank you. Are there any points of clarification? Okay, thank you. Jackie, anything you want to come back on just now? Okay then, so to enable debate to take place, I move the recommendation, which is to refuse planning permission.
Second that, Chair.
Councillor Nash, Llewellyn Nash, sorry. I've got jet lag from last night. I'm sorry,
I didn't put my hand up there.
You did earlier.
Oh, I did earlier. I just wanted to go back to the actual drawing of the 3 bungalows on the L shape. Yeah. And I just wanted, I can see where 2 gardens are going to be on the right hand side. So yeah, but I can't see where the garden is on the left hand side.
Okay, for that,
Yeah,
for
that,
the actual
yeah.
bungalow, the curtilage of that bungalow will be there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other Councillor Glass?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of points of clarification from the officers, really. There's a couple of terms that's been mentioned in garden land. What does that, is that something that's protected under whatever? And the backland development. Now I know once upon a time we used to allow backland development, but now you're saying that this is, we can't do that now. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think we've always taken things on their own merits in regard
I
to
know, I
backland
understand that,
development.
yeah.
You know, some cases we have done, and then others we haven't. It depends on the particular thing. But Jackie, if you want to address the thing about the garden stuff, you did mention it briefly.
In terms of the brownfield site, the old MPPF pretty much determined residential land, garden land as brownfield site. Now brownfield sites, as you know, are the ones where we'd be looking for development. The MPPF that came out last year actually has taken that wording out, and they no longer say that garden land is classed as brownfield site. So we'd be looking at it in terms of other policies that we'd have to look at, and indeed we'd have to protect if there were other reasons, adverse reasons for refusal.
Can I follow it up, Chair? Just by saying the example here is shown by the case that went to the planning inspector.
Yeah.
That
was recent.
we're using that as was it case law or whatever for the refusal.
Yes.
That it's an overdevelopment or.
It was backland development the same. It was just one bungalow in somebody's garden, and we used that particular case because it was it referred to the new NPPF for it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowden.
Chairman, I just asked the officers that Mr Craddock quoted two examples nearby because it's got a turn and because there are houses at the end of that. But the case which you're indicating is the critical case for you in making your decision, is the development's failure to integrate with the surrounding pattern of development. And Mr Craddock has actually quoted the end of quite a significant amount of housing, and it links up and its services work and all the frontages work with that, with the paddock and also with Farndon Close. So I don't really see that his quotation is relevant to this development, which is isolated. And the ultimate insult from Mr Buckley is he tried to secure the option to buy the land that this is built on, so he would have the same length of garden as his near neighbours, and he was denied that. And now the result is something which he considers quite threatening to his future peaceful enjoyment of his property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? It was very, I have to say, for me anyway, it was very educational listening to Mr Buckley. And in particular in regard to, well, we'll see where we go with this anyway, but he did mention about the number of trees on that side that screen the houses, and there must be a fair age those trees.
Mr Craddock suggested, sorry, but Mr Craddock suggested that you should visit the site.
Mr Buckley. And in fairness, well, regardless of what happens here, I think it may be worthy of getting the tree officer to see whether they're worthy of a TPO at some point. We know, not on sites like this, but what can happen on some sites. Okay, so there's no other member. The recommendation which has been moved and seconded is to refuse planning permission for the reasons printed. All those in favour of that? Thank you. So that's refused.
Chairman, I have another meeting to go to, I'm afraid. It's pushing right up against my time scale, so I may, I'll leave.
Okay, thank you. think you're all suffering a bit of jet lag.
Yeah, I should think you would.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Okay, we're sort of getting there now. Item number 5.
Yeah. This application is for the retention of a 2-storey extension to the front, 2-storey extension to the rear and a veranda to the rear. Permission was granted for the 2-storey extension to the rear and single-storey extension only onto the front on the 14th of July 2017. The 2-storey extension to the front projects off the original front elevations by 2 metres and 3 metres and is the full width of the house. You can see there, that's obviously the plan underneath. The 2-storey extension to the rear has been built as per the previous approval. Therefore, the only 2 things for consideration are the 2-storey front extension and the veranda to the rear. The veranda we are referring to is that part there. That part has already been granted permission. The veranda projects off the rear elevation of the 2-storey extension by 3 metres, but it does not span the entire width of the house. The structure is open to the sides, finished with a polycarbonate roof on oak posts. The application is surrounded with dwellings of varying age, type and design. This application is being reported to committee because a petition of objection signed by 5 local residents has been received. The objections are shown on page 81 of your agenda and include the fact it wasn't built as per the approved plans, windows and bricks do not match the original house, no mains drainage and building work took longer than predicted. The key issues to assessing the determination of this application are the impact on visual amenity, the impact on residential amenity and the design. In relation to the impact on visual amenity, the front 2-storey extension is visible from the public highway and fairly prominent, but it's set back from the highways by 10 metres. The surrounding area is characterised by medium to large detached houses, and it's therefore considered that the proposal size is in keeping with the area. The brickwork does not match the original house, but there are houses in the area built of buff bricks, and it's considered the difference isn't enough to warrant refusal. Therefore, it's considered that the front extension does not harm the visual amenity or appearance of the area and complies with policy. In reference to residential amenity, the most affected are the adjacent neighbours, number 50 and 54 Peak Avenue. In relation to 54 Peak Avenue, that's that house you can just see in outline there. This projects further back than the extensions at number 52. You can see that the house is actually further back than that. So it's considered there's no detrimental impact on this particular property. In relation to 54, which is this one, this is set slightly forward of number 52 and has a conservatory, that part there, to the rear. As a result, neither the 2-storey front extension nor the veranda affect any original windows. In reference to the impact to the rear garden of this neighbour, the applicant's veranda finishes 5.6 metres further back than this neighbour's rear conservatory. We're talking about that distance there. The residential design guide states that single-storey extensions should not exceed 4 metres from the back of the neighbouring properties. However, this policy is purely for extensions immediately on the boundary line. The veranda is set off the boundary by approximately 1.5 metres, so the impact is lessened. Also, the veranda is not enclosed and has a polycarbonate roof, all of which allows light through. It is therefore considered that a condition to ensure the structure is not enclosed will provide enough mitigation to ensure the acceptability to this neighbour's garden. It is therefore considered that the impact is acceptable to both neighbours. In reference to design, the 2-storey extension to the front is in general terms sympathetic to the original house, and therefore on balance, given the different styles in the area, the proposal is acceptable in design terms. In conclusion, it's considered that the proposal largely complies with the residential design guide or has mitigating circumstances, and that the impact to neighbouring properties and to the visual amenity is acceptable. The recommendation to committee is therefore of approval, subject to the condition as stated on page 83 of the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay then, Jackie, we don't have any speakers, so can I, to enable debate to take place, move the recommendation, which is approval subject to the conditions printed. Thank you. Any member? Councillor Tandy?
Just one concern, Chair, on page 81, where it towards the bottom where it talks about neighbour responses, number 3. It says, does not appear to have any mains drainage causing problems during heavy rain. Do we have any evidence of any problems with that, or any expert knowledge with that to do with it, Chair?
I think that would be something that comes under building control.
It would. Yeah, we couldn't cover it under the planning legislation, unfortunately.
Okay, oh, yeah, Councillor Pond.
Have we had any indication as to how this development took place without there being any permission?
These things happen, unfortunately, and it was just a case that we'd received a complaint about it, so we obviously investigated and we invited the application, the resubmission of the application as built.
The majority of the application does have planning permission, as per the
Yeah.
previous thing. It's just that it was done differently at the front, really, to the approval, and it's not a criminal offence to do something without planning permission, and the legislation does allow retention applications to be submitted.
Thankfully, it is pretty rare when we get something, but you can be sure neighbours or somebody else, you know, it's normally the way that we find out about things. We don't have people patrolling the streets. Just two things. I do want to start by saying that one thing that's going to annoy a planning committee, particularly this one, is when people do things without permission. Having said that, as you've just said, it's not illegal to do things without planning permission. It is only afterwards that it's found out and it doesn't comply with things. Can I just ask, because it's probably perhaps my memory, but I can't actually recall this one. Was it one that was done under delegation?
Yes.
Ah, right, that's your fault. I did say it. Yeah.
I know, yeah.
Councillor Llewellyn.
I just wanted clarification. So, this house has already been extended at the back, bricks and mortar, and that was in the planning permission guidelines. So does this veranda then go, because it's, whether it's a temporary, is it classed as a temporary building, but it must exceed the planning that doesn't require planning permission,
Yes.
which is 3 metres, if I understand correctly.
4 metres for detached.
4 metres for a detached. But this makes the veranda go beyond
Yes.
the 4 metres, which is why we're here debating it now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Is a veranda classed as a temporary?
No.
No. It's classed as part. Right.
Did I miss anybody? No. Okay, right, okay then. As I say, the recommendation is approval subject to the conditions printed. All those in favour of that? No? And against? Okay, so that's approved. We don't have any urgent items or any other business. So, can I thank you very much for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Chair.
Take